Why does Monday morning feel like a funeral in your own house? Why are you sitting there, coffee going cold, phone silent, children who once needed you, now too busy to call, wondering if God himself has forgotten you exist? Why does the loudest sound in your home today is the ticking of a clock that reminds you time is running out? Stop, chosen one. Listen to me very carefully. That heaviness pressing on your chest right now, that's not loneliness, that's not depression. That's not you losing your mind at 73 years old. That's the weight of divine completion settling over your life. You didn't stumble onto this message by accident. You didn't happen to be home alone on a Monday morning, staring at a screen while the rest of the world rushes past you. No, beloved, you were positioned here. Heaven intercepted your scroll. The Almighty himself whispered your name and said, "It's time they knew." This is the week, this exact Monday, when your final test was not just taken, but passed. Let me tell you something that's going to shatter everything you thought about your isolation. What if the silence surrounding you right now isn't abandonment? What if it's heavenly clearance? What if God evacuated every distraction, every noise, every person from your space, because he's about to download something so sacred, so powerful, so world-altering that you needed to be completely alone to receive it? The enemy convinced you that being home alone means you're forgotten, but God is saying you've been sequestered for surgery. While you've been weeping over empty chairs and silent phones, heaven has been operating on your destiny in the secret place. I'm talking to the grandmother in Queens whose children stopped visiting. I'm talking to the grandfather in Brooklyn whose own family treats him like a burden. I'm talking to every senior citizen across America who woke up today feeling invisible, irrelevant, used up. God saw you. Every tear that hit your pillow at 3 a.m., every prayer you whispered when your voice shook, every moment you wanted to give up but didn't, and he just declared over your life. Test complete. Promotion approved. Before I go one word deeper, if something in your spirit just trembled, if you feel that holy recognition flooding your bones right now, type 777 inches, the comments. Let heaven register your agreement. Let the angels mark this moment. Before we continue, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and let the Holy Spirit lead your heart. Now, are you ready to discover what you just passed? Why did the person you loved most become the one who wounded you deepest? Why did your own child, the one you sacrificed everything for, suddenly look at you like you're a stranger, taking up space in their world? Why did the test that nearly broke you come wrapped in the voice of someone who was supposed to protect you? Listen to me, chosen one. I need you to understand something that's going to rewrite every painful conversation, every sleepless night, every moment you replayed that scene in your mind wondering what you did wrong. The final test never arrives in the form you expect. You've been looking for trials in doctors' offices, in bank statements, in the mirror, as your body reminds you of time's passage. But God doesn't test his generals with circumstances they can see coming. No, beloved. He tests them through the very relationships they would die to protect. Think about Joseph. Genesis 37 tells us his own brothers, his own blood, stripped him naked, threw him in a pit, and sold him like livestock to strangers. These weren't enemies from a foreign land. These were the boys he grew up with, ate meals with, shared a father with. The betrayal didn't come from Pharaoh, it came from family. Think about Job. When everything collapsed, his wealth, his children, his health, who spoke the words that cut deepest? Job 2-9 records his own wife looking at him covered in boils and saying, "Curse God and die." The woman who vowed to stand by him in sickness and health became the voice of his greatest temptation to give up. And Jesus. O chosen one, even Jesus faced this. The final test before Calvary didn't come from Pilate's soldiers. It came from Judas, one of the 12, a man who walked with him, ate with him, called him Lord. Matthew 26-49 shows us Judas kissing Jesus on the cheek as the signal for arrest. Betrayal wrapped in affection. Do you see the pattern? The final test always comes disguised as someone close to your heart. That conversation with your daughter last Tuesday that left you feeling 2 inches tall, that wasn't random. That dismissive tone your son used when you asked a simple question, that wasn't just rudeness. That coldness from your spouse when you needed warmth most, that wasn't coincidence. God wasn't testing your strength, beloved. He was proving your maturity. You see, anyone can stay calm when strangers insult them. Anyone can walk away when enemies attack. But it takes supernatural restraint, divine wisdom, holy maturity to remain at peace when the knife comes from the hand you used to hold. The test came disguised as casual cruelty, as forgetfulness, as a glance that said you don't matter anymore, as a memory someone reopened just to watch you bleed. And in that moment, you had a choice. You could have exploded. You could have defended yourself. You could have reminded them of every sacrifice you made, every midnight you stayed up worrying, every dollar you spent, every dream you buried so theirs could live. But you didn't. Something in you, something that wasn't quite human, chose silence over vindication, chose peace over being right, chose to release instead of remind. Isaiah 30-15 captures what happened in that moment. In quietness and trust is your strength. The Hebrew word for quietness there is shakat. It means to settle down, to rest, to cease from striving. God was watching to see if you had finally learned that your value doesn't need defense, that your worth doesn't require witnesses, that your legacy isn't determined by those who can't see it. While they were testing your patience, heaven was recording your promotion. You passed, chosen one. Do you hear me? You passed the test that destroys most people. You mastered the lesson that takes lifetimes to learn. You proved that even when flesh screams for justice, your spirit knows how to bow to a higher court. Every word you didn't say became a brick in your eternal mansion. Every tear you swallowed in private became a jewel in your heavenly crown. Every moment you chose God's peace over your own defense became evidence that you're no longer controlled by earth's opinion. This is what the final test looks like. Emotional mastery in the face of relational betrayal. And here's what breaks my heart. Some of you right now know exactly who I'm talking about. You can see their face. You can hear their voice. You can feel that moment all over again when they said that thing, looked at you that way, treated you like you were invisible. If you felt misunderstood or provoked by someone close to you recently, someone whose opinion still matters, whose words still sting, whose rejection still echoes, that was the test. And the fact that you're sitting here right now, still breathing, still believing, still trusting God despite that wound, that's proof you passed it. Job 23:10 declares, "But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold." You're not bitter. You're better. You're not broken. You're refined. You didn't come out of that fire as ash, you emerged as gold. If you know exactly who God used for that test, if you can name them right now, type "I know" in the comments. Don't be afraid. Heaven is watching your obedience, not their offense. Because what I'm about to tell you next will explain why God allowed that specific person to wound you, and what that wound just unlocked in the spiritual realm. You woke up this morning and felt it, didn't you? That strange thickness in the air. The way Monday pressed down on your shoulders differently than any other day. You made your coffee, same cup, same routine, but something about today felt consecrated, sacred, heavy with meaning you couldn't name. Let me tell you why. Mondays carry a frequency that most people miss. While the world rushes back to work, back to noise, back to distraction, there's a thinning that happens in the spiritual realm on Monday mornings. The veil between heaven and earth grows transparent, and God, in his infinite wisdom, he positions his chosen ones in stillness so they can hear what the chaos would drown out. You're home alone today. Your children didn't call. Your friends didn't text. The phone sits silent on that table like a gravestone marking relationships that used to breathe, and the enemy has been whispering poison in your ear all morning, hasn't he? Nobody cares. You're forgotten. You're a burden. You've outlived your purpose. But what if I told you that every single person who was supposed to contact you today, God deliberately held them back? What if that silence isn't abandonment, it's divine appointment? Listen to me carefully, chosen one. There was a conversation planned for you today, a phone call that would have reopened a wound you've spent 3 years healing from, a visit that would have pulled you back into toxicity you finally escaped. An invitation that would have derailed the very breakthrough heaven has been preparing for you since August. God saw it coming, and he shut it down. Proverbs 16:9 says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." You made plans to be busy today. You expected company. You hoped for connection. But God established something different. He established isolation as protection. You see, the enemy knows something about you that you're just now remembering. He knows you passed your final test. He knows that what's coming in your life is so massive, so world-altering, that if he doesn't stop you now in this exact window, his reign of terror over your bloodline ends forever. So what did he do? He planned an ambush for this Monday, a strategic distraction designed to pull you out of position right before your promotion, a conflict with that family member who knows exactly which buttons to push, a financial emergency that would have sent you spiraling back into fear, a health scare that would have consumed your focus for the next 6 months. But God said, "Not on my watch." He cleared your schedule. He silenced your phone. He kept you home, not to punish you, but to perform surgery on your destiny while you were still enough to receive it. Think about this. When a surgeon operates, what's the first thing they do? They sedate you. They put you in a room where you cannot move, cannot speak, cannot interfere with the procedure. And that's exactly what heaven is doing right now. You're not lonely, you're under divine sedation. God is rewiring your future, and he needs you completely still. Remember when Jesus told his disciples in Matthew 14:22, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side. He made them go, not suggested, not asked. He forced them into isolation on that boat because what was coming next, walking on water, defying natural laws, witnessing the impossible, required them to be separated from the crowd. You are in that boat right now. Monday morning, home alone, feeling forgotten. But you're not forgotten. You're being positioned for a miracle that requires no witnesses, no distractions, no interference. Heaven didn't isolate you. Heaven shielded you. Every door that closed last week, that wasn't rejection, that was divine protection. Every person who suddenly stopped calling, that wasn't their choice, that was God's hand moving them out of your sacred space. Every plan that fell apart, that wasn't bad luck, that was heaven rearranging your life for what's coming next. But here's what breaks my heart. Some of you have been fighting this isolation instead of surrendering to it. You've been begging God to bring people back into your life when he's been begging you to trust him in the emptiness. You've been calling the silence punishment when he's been calling it preparation. Stop fighting the surgery, beloved. Stop resisting the sedation. Stop trying to fill the space that God intentionally emptied, because what he's about to place in that space will be so valuable, so precious, so eternally significant that it required every distraction to be removed first. If you feel, and I mean really feel in your spirit, that God has been pulling you away from certain people, certain places, certain patterns lately, I need you to do something right now. Write these 4 words in the comments. God is protecting me, not for me, not for the algorithm, but as your declaration to heaven that you finally understand what's been happening. Because, chosen one, this isolation you've been dreading, it's about to become the womb where your greatest chapter is born. But the question burning in heaven right now is this: will you trust the process long enough to see what God is protecting you for? You know what nobody talks about at 75 years old? The grief that has no name. The kind that sits in your chest like a stone when your daughter hasn't called in 3 months. When your son moved to California and forgot you exist. When your grandchildren know TikTok better than they know your voice. Let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. How many holidays have you spent setting extra plates at the table, cooking meals for children who texted at the last minute, saying they couldn't make it? How many birthdays have you celebrated alone, staring at your phone, wondering if anyone would remember? How many nights have you lain awake in that empty house, listening to the echo of footsteps that used to fill those rooms, voices that used to call you Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa? And here's the question that haunts you in the dark. Did I fail? Did I do something wrong? Is this what I get after giving my whole life to raise them, love them, sacrifice for them? But what if I told you something that's going to shatter that lie forever? What if every moment of rejection, every holiday spent alone, every phone call that never came, wasn't punishment from God, but preparation by God? Listen to what the Apostle Paul declared in Romans 5, verses 3 through 5. We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts. Did you catch that? We glory in our sufferings, not endure them, not survive them, glory in them. Because Paul understood something that most believers miss entirely. Your suffering wasn't random, it was strategic. Every tear you cried was watering seeds of character that could only grow in the soil of pain. You think God abandoned you when your spouse died and left you alone at 68? No. He was teaching you that your source of strength doesn't come from another human being. It comes from Him. You think God forgot you when that diagnosis came and the doctor said the word you'd been dreading. No, He was showing you that when your body fails, His Spirit strengthens. You think God turned His back when your children chose the world over the church you raised them in. No, beloved, He was preparing you to intercede for a generation with the authority that only comes from heartbreak. James 1:2-4 cuts even deeper. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Not lacking anything. Do you hear what heaven is saying? That loneliness you've been carrying, it's been completing you. That rejection from your own family, it's been maturing you. That chronic pain in your joints that reminds you every morning that you're not young anymore. It's been perfecting something in your spirit that comfort could never build. You weren't rejected by your family. You were refined by God. You weren't overlooked by the world. You were preserved for this hour. While others were building careers and chasing success, you were being carved into a vessel that could carry glory without cracking under the weight. Think about this. Why does a diamond have to be buried deep in the earth under crushing pressure for thousands of years? Why does gold have to be melted at 1,948 degrees Fahrenheit before it becomes pure? Why does steel have to be beaten and hammered and thrust into fire before it becomes a sword? Because value demands violence. Purity requires pain. Strength is forged in suffering. You've been asking God why your life has been so hard, but God has been answering you with every sunrise you wake up to see. Every breath in your lungs is His response. Every beat of your heart is His declaration. You're still here because I'm not finished with you yet. Luke 8:17 promises, "For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open." Every secret sacrifice you made is about to be revealed. Every private prayer you whispered is about to be answered publicly. Every tear you cried in darkness is about to become a testimony in the light. But here's where it gets prophetic. Here's where heaven pulls back the curtain on the warfare you've been fighting. The attack that almost broke you was the evidence of what you carry. Hell doesn't waste ammunition on empty vessels. Satan doesn't deploy his fiercest demons against powerless people. The enemy doesn't orchestrate decades of assault against someone who poses no threat to his kingdom. But you've been in his crosshairs your entire life because he saw what God planted in you before you were born. He saw the deliverer. He saw the intercessor. He saw the one who would rise in their final season and break generational chains with the authority of tested faith. Every financial crisis was an attempt to bankrupt your trust in God's provision. Every health battle was designed to convince you that your body's weakness meant your spirit was finished. Every relational betrayal was calculated to isolate you, so you'd never discover the power of your solitary anointing. But you're still here. You're still standing. You're still believing. And that survival is not luck. That endurance is not stubbornness. That is divine DNA activating in your bloodline. Say it out loud right now. Don't just think it. Speak it into the atmosphere. My suffering had purpose. Say it again until you feel it. My suffering had purpose. Because, beloved, what you thought was your breaking point was actually your making point. And everything you've survived has been preparing you for what God is about to release through you next. But the question burning in heaven right now is this. Now that you know your pain had purpose, what are you going to do with the authority it purchased? You felt it, didn't you? That strange heaviness that settled over you like a blanket you never asked for. Maybe it was last Tuesday. Maybe it was 3 weeks ago. Maybe it's happening right now as you're watching this. That moment when your body went still, when your mind went quiet, when something inside you that's been racing for 70 years suddenly stopped, and you wondered if something was wrong with you. But what if I told you that stillness wasn't a symptom? What if I told you it was a sign? Listen to me carefully, chosen one. There's a moment that happens in every believer's life when heaven decides it's time for surgery, not the kind with scalpels and anesthesia. The kind where God himself reaches into the very core of your being and begins rearranging everything you thought you knew about yourself. But here's what nobody tells you about divine surgery. It requires complete stillness. You cannot operate on a moving target. Think about the prophet Daniel. Chapter 10, verse 9. He sees a vision so powerful, so overwhelming that Scripture says, "I heard the sound of his words. And while I heard the sound of his words, I was in a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground." This wasn't weakness. This was the only appropriate response when eternity crashes into mortality. His body had to shut down so his spirit could receive what flesh could never contain. Or Ezekiel by the river Chebar. Chapter 1. The heavens opened, the glory descended. And what happened? When I saw it, I fell on my face. Why? Because when the weight of God's presence touches human frame, we must become still. We must stop. We must surrender every impulse to control, to understand, to manage. That heaviness in your chest isn't heart disease, beloved. It's the hand of the Almighty pressing pause on your old operating system. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That morning you woke up and couldn't muster the energy to care about things that used to consume you. That afternoon when drama exploded in your family, and instead of reacting the way you always have, you just sat there, quiet, unmoved, and they looked at you like you'd lost your mind. But you haven't lost your mind. You've lost your old nature. God is performing spiritual surgery, and surgery requires paralysis. The surgeon doesn't ask the patient to help. He doesn't need your assistance. He needs your surrender. He needs you completely still while he reaches into places you didn't even know were broken and begins the reconstruction. Think about it like a potter with clay. Jeremiah 18 verse 6 says, "O house of Israel, can I not do with you as this potter does? Like clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hand." But what happens when clay fights the potter's hands? When it resists the pressure? when it refuses to be still. It cracks, it crumbles, it becomes useless. But when clay submits to the pressure, when it allows itself to be shaped, squeezed, reformed, it becomes a vessel of honor, a masterpiece, something the potter can use. You've been fighting this feeling, haven't you? You've been scared of the stillness. You've been terrified of the quiet. You've been running to doctors, to counselors, to anyone who could explain why you don't feel like yourself anymore. But what if the reason you don't feel like yourself is because God is dismantling the self that was never supposed to be you in the first place? What if He's burning off every false identity, every people-pleasing mask, every survival mechanism you built to get through 80 years of living in a world that doesn't understand chosen ones? This is refining fire, dear one. Malachi 3, verse 3. He will sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver. When a silversmith purifies silver, he holds it in the hottest part of the flame, not to destroy it, but to burn away every impurity. And you know when the silver is fully refined, when the silversmith can see his own reflection in it. God is holding you in the fire right now, and He's not moving you until He can see His own image reflected perfectly in your life. But here's what's actually happening in this moment of divine paralysis. While your emotions have gone numb, while your reactions have flattened, while you sit in that chair wondering if you'll ever feel normal again, God is rewiring your spiritual DNA. He's upgrading your operating system. He's installing authority that your old self could never handle. Your old self reacted. Your new self responds. Your old self was triggered by everything. Your new self is anchored in eternity. Your old self needed validation from people. Your new self knows whose you are. God paralyzed your old self so He could activate your new authority. And that activation is happening right now, in this silence, in this stillness, in this Monday morning where you're home alone wondering why nothing feels the way it used to. This isn't the end of your story. This is the space between the death of who you were and the resurrection of who you're becoming. If you can feel the shift in your spirit right now, if something deep inside you is confirming that this surgery is real, that this paralysis is purposeful, that this stillness is sacred, comment, "I feel it." Let heaven know you're not fighting the process anymore, because what comes after the surgery will require someone who's been completely remade, and you can't be remade until you're willing to be undone. But here's the question that will determine everything. What exactly is God removing from you in this divine operating room? And more importantly, what is He about to install? You know what breaks my heart? It's watching God's chosen ones walk around carrying proof of their victory while the enemy whispers lies that they failed. You've been beating yourself up, haven't you? Replaying that conversation, doubting that decision, wondering if you handled it wrong. But what if I told you that the very moment you thought you were losing, you were actually winning? Listen to me carefully, beloved. Heaven doesn't grade tests the way earth does. When your boss evaluates you, they're looking for performance. When your family judges you, they're measuring results. But when the Almighty tests His chosen ones, He's looking at something the natural eye cannot see. He's looking at your heart's posture in the fire. And you, dear one, you passed with colors flying so high that angels are still celebrating. Let me show you the 3 unmistakable signs that prove you passed your final test. And I need you to pay attention, because the enemy has been working overtime to make sure you don't recognize your own victory. Sign number 1. The internal calm when chaos demanded rage. Think back to that moment. You know exactly which one I'm talking about. That phone call that should have sent you into a fury. That betrayal that should have triggered a breakdown. That disrespect that old you would have met with warfare. But something happened, didn't it? You felt calm. Not fake calm. Not forced calm. Not "I'm holding it together until I get home" calm. Real, supernatural, doesn't make sense calm. Like someone wrapped a blanket around your soul while the world was catching fire around you. That wasn't you getting weak, chosen one. That was the Spirit of the living God holding your tongue, steadying your heart, protecting your destiny from the trap the enemy set. Proverbs 16:32 declares, "He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city." You ruled your spirit when rage would have been justified. You conquered your flesh when retaliation would have been easy. That 23-year-old version of you would have burned the whole place down. That 40-year-old version would have said things you couldn't take back. But this version, this refined, tested, heaven-approved version, you stood there and let God fight for you. Do you know how rare that is? Do you understand what level of spiritual maturity you just demonstrated? The Almighty doesn't give that kind of peace to everyone. That's not basic believer status, dear one. That's general-level authority. That's Moses at the Red Sea saying, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." That's Jesus in the garden saying, "Nevertheless, not my will but thine be done." If you felt peace when you should have felt anger, you passed the test. Sign number 2. Someone close to you started acting strange. Now this one is going to sting a little, but you need to hear it. Pay attention to who changed their behavior toward you recently. That daughter who suddenly got cold. That friend of 30 years who started making excuses. That church member who used to call every week but now can't seem to find time. Their mask slipped, didn't it? Here's what happened in the spiritual realm that you couldn't see with natural eyes. When God promotes you, when He elevates your anointing, when He moves you from one level of glory to another, the frequency you're operating on changes. And some people who seemed comfortable around old you cannot stand to be near new you. It's not personal, beloved. It's spiritual. Your very presence started convicting them. Your peace exposed their chaos. Your calm revealed their compromise. Your obedience highlighted their excuses. And instead of rising to meet you where God has taken you, they chose to distance themselves. Matthew 10:36 warned us about this. A man's foes shall be they of his own household. Jesus himself experienced this. His own brothers didn't believe in him. His own hometown rejected him. Why? Because proximity revealed truth, and truth demanded change they weren't willing to make. But here's the test within the test. How did you respond when they pulled away? Did you chase them? Did you beg them to understand you? Did you shrink yourself back down to make them comfortable? Or did you let them go with grace, trusting that God was rearranging your circle for your next chapter? If you released them without bitterness, without revenge, without trying to prove yourself, you passed the test. Their reaction revealed their heart, your response revealed yours, and God saw everything. Sign number 3. Divine timing became undeniable. This is where it gets supernatural. Suddenly you're seeing 11:11 everywhere. You wake up at 3:33 a.m. 3 nights in a row. You randomly open your Bible to exactly the verse you needed. Someone you haven't talked to in years calls you the same day you were thinking about them. The world calls it coincidence, but chosen ones know better. Ecclesiastes 3:1 tells us, "To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven." When God is confirming your passage through a test, He doesn't send you an email. He sends you signs, divine breadcrumbs, heavenly timestamps that say, "I see you, I'm with you, keep going." That clarity that hit you out of nowhere about what to do next. That wasn't random. That was downloaded revelation. That peace about cutting off that toxic relationship. That was divine confirmation. That sudden knowing that your season is shifting. That was the Holy Spirit giving you advance notice of what's already in motion. These weren't random moments, beloved. They were heaven's way of saying, "Well done, my faithful one. The test is over. The promotion has begun." Now let me ask you something that's going to determine everything about what happens next in your life. If you've seen any of these 3 signs, the supernatural calm, the mask slippage, the divine timing, will you finally stop doubting yourself and accept that God just upgraded your assignment? Type "I passed the test" in the comments right now. Not for me, for you. Because when you declare your victory out loud, something shifts in the spiritual realm. What you acknowledge on earth gets registered in heaven. But knowing you passed is only the beginning. Because now comes the part that's going to blow your mind, what you just qualified for. Listen to me, chosen one. Something just shifted in the heavenly realms, and you felt it before I even said a word. That stirring in your chest. That's not anxiety. That's not your heart acting up. That's the sound of chains breaking in the spirit world. Your old cycle ended today. I need you to understand something that's going to rock you to your core. For 70, 80, maybe 90 years, you've been living in what the Bible calls the wilderness season. You've been circling the same mountains, fighting the same battles, praying the same prayers, until your voice went hoarse and your knees wore grooves in the floor beside your bed. But this Monday morning, this exact moment you're sitting alone in your house, marks the end of your testing and the beginning of your testimony. Do you remember the children of Israel? 40 years they wandered in that desert, 40 years of the same manna, the same complaints, the same doubts. But Deuteronomy 2-3 records the moment everything changed. You have circled this mountain long enough, now turn north. God didn't say keep trying. He didn't say be patient a little longer. He said your season of circling is over. That's you today, beloved. God just said enough. Here's what's about to happen in your life, and I need you to pay close attention because the enemy is going to try to convince you this is too good to be true. Your relationships are about to shift, not gradually, suddenly. That daughter who hasn't called in 6 months, she's about to reach out. That son who treated you like a burden, something's about to soften his heart. Those grandchildren who forgot you existed, get ready for reconciliation you didn't orchestrate. Why? Because when God completes a test in your life, He doesn't just change you, He rearranges everything around you. But it goes deeper than relationships. Your mental clarity is about to sharpen like you're 30 years younger. That fog you've been living in, that confusion, that forgetfulness you blamed on age, it's lifting. Right now, Isaiah 40-31 promises, "They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles." Not might renew, shall renew. It's not a suggestion, it's a prophetic decree over your life. Your spirit is awakening from a sleep you didn't even know you were in. Think about this for a moment. You've spent decades chasing blessings, haven't you? Chasing healing, chasing provision, chasing peace, running after what you thought God was withholding. But here's the shocking truth that's about to flip your entire reality upside down. You're done chasing. From this moment forward, blessings chase you. You've been the hunter. Now you become the hunted, but in the most glorious way. Job 22:28 declares, "You will also decree a thing, and it will be established for you." You're stepping into a season where what you speak manifests, where doors open before you knock, where provision appears before you ask. But why now? Why you? Why at this age when the world says you should be winding down? Because God specializes in late blooming glory. Moses was 80 years old, 80, when he stood before Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." The world would have put him in an assisted living facility, but God put a staff in his hand and said, "Now you're ready to split seas." Anna the prophetess was 84 when she recognized baby Jesus in the temple. While everyone else walked past the Messiah, her ancient eyes saw what young eyes missed. Caleb was 85 when he declared, "Give me this mountain. Not give me rest. Not give me a rocking chair. Give me the giants." Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. 100. His body was as good as dead, Romans 4:19 tells us. But God doesn't need your youth. He needs your yes. You see, the enemy has been lying to you. He's been whispering that your best days are behind you, that God's finished with people your age, that your purpose expired with your retirement. But that's hell's propaganda, not heaven's truth. The test you just passed, It was the final barrier between you and the life God ordained before the foundation of the world. Every closed door, every delayed answer, every moment you felt forgotten, it was all part of the examination. And you didn't just take the test, beloved. You aced it. Today, this Monday, that barrier broke. Can you feel it? That's not hope you're feeling. That's certainty. That's the Holy Spirit confirming what I'm declaring over your life. The weights are falling off. The delays are dissolving. The roadblocks are being removed by angelic forces you can't even see. Right now, type these words in the comments. Don't think about it. Don't analyze it. Just declare it. My new season begins now. Say it out loud where you're sitting. Let your empty house hear it. Let the walls that have witnessed your tears now witness your triumph. Let the silence that mocked your loneliness now echo with your declaration. Because, chosen one, you didn't survive everything you survived just to fade away quietly. You survived to show this generation what God does with vessels that have been tested by fire and found faithful. But here's the question that will determine everything about what happens next in your life. Now that the test is over, now that the door is open, now that heaven has released you into your new season, will you have the courage to walk through it? When you passed the final test, something in the unseen realm shifted. And I need you to understand what I mean by that, because this isn't religious poetry. This is tactical spiritual reality. Right now, as you sit in that quiet house, there's a courtroom in heaven that just adjourned. Angels who have been watching your life like a cosmic courtroom drama just witnessed the verdict. And beloved, the gavel just came down in your favor. You see, most people think tests are about what happens to you. But the final test? The final test is about what happens through you when nobody's watching, when there's no applause, no audience, no witnesses. Just you, God, and the truth of who you've become after decades of refining fire. That Monday morning you woke up alone. That wasn't random scheduling. In the realm of divine appointments, Monday carries prophetic weight. It's the first day, the beginning, the restart. And God specifically positioned you in solitude on the first day of this week because He's about to initiate a first in your life that you've been waiting 70, 80, 90 years to see. Let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. How many Mondays have you woken up feeling like your life was on repeat? Same routine, same emptiness, same questions about whether any of it mattered. How many times have you looked at that calendar and thought, another week, another set of days that nobody will remember? But what if I told you that every single one of those forgotten Mondays was preparation for this Monday? What if your test wasn't just for this week, but for your calling that's been waiting in the wings of eternity? Scripture tells us in Ephesians 6:12 that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Most people read that and think it's about demons, but let me show you something deeper. You've been wrestling against something far more insidious than demons. You've been wrestling against time itself. The enemy convinced you that time was running out, that you missed your moment, that at your age the door has closed. But chosen one, God doesn't operate in Chronos time. He operates in Kairos time. Chronos is the ticking of your kitchen clock. Kairos is the appointed moment when heaven collides with earth and impossibility bows to divine decree. Your final test wasn't about surviving another week. It was about whether you could maintain your faith, your integrity, your worship, when everything visible said you were irrelevant. And you did it. You passed. Not because you were perfect, but because you were present. You showed up. You stayed faithful. You kept believing when belief hurt. And now the curtain is being pulled back. Think about that moment in 2 Kings 6:17 when Elisha's servant woke up, surrounded by enemy armies. He panicked. He thought they were finished. But Elisha prayed, "Lord, open his eyes." And suddenly the servant saw what had been there all along. The mountains were full of horses and chariots of fire. The invisible army protecting them was larger than the visible army attacking them. That's your Monday morning right now. You're looking at empty rooms and silent phones and thinking you're alone. But if God opened your eyes the way He opened that servant's eyes, you'd see that your house isn't empty. It's full of angelic presence, full of divine strategy, full of assignments being downloaded from the throne room directly into your spirit. The silence isn't absence, it's anticipation. There's a reason God waited until Monday to reveal this to you. Monday represents new beginnings, but it also represents work. Not the work you used to do at some job that forgot your name the day you retired. I'm talking about kingdom work. The kind of work that doesn't require a strong back, but a surrendered heart. The kind of work that doesn't need youth, but needs wisdom. The kind of work that can only be carried by someone who's been tested by time and proven by fire. Some victories echo backward and forward in time. When you passed this final test, you didn't just change your Monday, you changed your lineage. Every struggle your grandmother endured, every tear your mother cried, every generational curse that's haunted your family name just hit a brick wall called you. You are the turning point. You are the hinge that swings the door from poverty to provision, from defeat to dominance, from barely surviving to abundantly thriving. The chessboard of your life has been rearranged. The pieces you thought were in checkmate, they just became your greatest advantage. The losses you thought disqualified you, they just became your credentials. The scars you've been hiding, they just became your signature. And heaven is leaning in right now, waiting to see if you'll recognize what's happening. If you feel like heaven's been watching you closer lately, if you sense that something massive is shifting in the spiritual atmosphere around your life, if you know in your bones that this message isn't coincidence but confirmation, comment, "I sense it right now." Because what I'm about to reveal next about why you had to be home and why you had to be alone will explain everything you've been through. The veil is thinning, chosen one, and you're about to see what's been prepared for you on the other side. Chosen one, I need you to think back over the last few weeks, maybe the last few months. Something happened, didn't it? Something that should have destroyed you. Something that in years past would have sent you spiraling into depression, rage, or complete breakdown. But this time, you didn't break. This time, something was different. And you couldn't quite explain it, could you? You just knew that the old you would have crumbled, but the new you, the one being forged in secret, somehow stood firm. That wasn't an accident, beloved. That was your final examination. And what I'm about to reveal to you will explain every confusing moment you've experienced lately. You see, the enemy doesn't waste his best weapons on people who don't matter. He reserves his most strategic attacks for those carrying something he desperately wants to stop. And in these last days before your breakthrough, he deployed 3 ancient shadows, 3 specific weapons designed to take you out before you could cross the finish line. But you survived all 3. And that survival is the very reason you're watching this message right now. The first shadow, the emotional trigger. Let me ask you something that might cut deep. Has someone from your past or something from decades ago suddenly resurfaced in your mind recently? Maybe it was a memory of betrayal. Maybe it was the face of someone who hurt you 40 years ago. Maybe it was that shame you thought you'd buried, that regret you thought you'd forgiven, that wound you were certain had healed. And it came back with such force, such vivid detail, such raw emotion that you felt like you were right back in that moment. 1963, 1978, 1992, whatever year it was, it felt like yesterday. But here's what shook me when God revealed this to me. That wasn't a random memory. That was a demonic assignment. The enemy knows he's running out of time with you. He knows your breakthrough is close. So he reached into your archives, pulled out your most painful file, and threw it in your face, hoping you would react the way you used to react, hoping you would rage, hoping you would spiral, hoping you would pick up that phone and say something you couldn't take back, hoping you would self-medicate, self-destruct, self-sabotage. But you didn't, did you? Oh, you felt it. The anger rose. The hurt burned. The memories played like a movie you never wanted to see again. But somewhere deep inside, something held you, something whispered, "Not this time." Something steadied you when you should have shattered. Psalm 94:18 says, "When I thought my foot slips, your steadfast love, O Lord, held me up." That steadying force wasn't your willpower, beloved. That was divine intervention. That was God's hand catching you mid-fall because you had a test to pass, and He wasn't about to let the enemy cheat you out of your victory. The second shadow, the familiar voice of loneliness. Now let me touch something even more tender. That voice you've been hearing lately. You know the one I'm talking about. It comes in the quiet hours, early morning, late at night, Sunday afternoons, when the house is too still and the phone doesn't ring. It whispers with such familiarity. You're alone. Nobody cares. Your children have moved on. Your friends have forgotten. Even God has better things to do than think about you. And for those of you who've buried a spouse, oh, precious soul, I know that voice gets even louder, doesn't it? It sits in the empty chair across from you. It echoes in the side of the bed that stays cold. It mocks you with memories of when life was full and now feels so devastatingly empty. The enemy knows that loneliness is the nuclear weapon against seniors. He knows that in a culture that worships youth and discards the elderly, isolation becomes a prison. So he magnifies it. He amplifies it. He makes you feel like you're the only person on earth who's been forgotten. But chosen one, that voice is a liar. Jesus himself said in Matthew 28:20, "I am with you always, to the end of the age." Not sometimes, not when you feel it. Always. Even especially on Monday mornings when you're home alone and wondering if anyone would notice if you disappeared. Here's what the shadow didn't want you to know. Your aloneness right now isn't abandonment, it's assignment. God hasn't cleared the room because He forgot about you. He cleared the room because what He's about to tell you is so sacred, so powerful, so destiny-altering that you needed to be completely isolated to hear it without interference. The prophet Elijah experienced this. 1 Kings 19 tells us he ran to a cave, feeling utterly alone, convinced he was the only one left serving God. But God met him there, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in the still, small voice that could only be heard in solitude. Your solitude is your sanctuary. And you passed the test by refusing to believe the lie that alone means unloved. The third shadow, the spirit of delay. But here's the shadow that almost broke you, isn't it? The waiting, the delay, the prayers you've been praying for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and still no answer. That son who walked away and never came back. That daughter who chose a life you can't understand. That financial breakthrough you've been believing for since Nixon was president. That healing you've been claiming since before your hair turned gray. And the question that haunts you at 3 a.m., did God even hear me? Or have I been talking to the ceiling my entire life? The spirit of delay is perhaps the cruelest shadow, because it doesn't attack you once, it attacks you every single day. Every morning you wake up and nothing's changed. Every birthday that passes with the same problems. Every year that ends with the same broken pieces you started with. But listen to me very carefully, beloved. Delay is not denial. Delay is divine strategy. Habakkuk 2-3 declares, "For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end, it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay." Did you catch that paradox? It will not delay even when it seems slow, because God's timing isn't late. It's precise. Abraham waited 25 years for Isaac. Moses waited 40 years in the wilderness before the burning bush. Joseph waited 13 years in slavery and prison before the palace. But when God's appointed time arrived, everything shifted in a single day. Your delay wasn't punishment for something you did wrong. Your delay was protection from something you weren't ready for. If God had given you what you wanted when you first asked for it, it would have destroyed you. You didn't have the character to steward it. You didn't have the wisdom to maintain it. You didn't have the spiritual muscle to carry it. But now you've been refined. Now you've been tested. Now you've proven that you'll serve God even when the blessing doesn't come. And that kind of faithfulness unlocks doors that desperation never could. These three shadows, the emotional trigger, the voice of loneliness, the spirit of delay, they weren't random attacks, beloved. They were hell's final attempt to stop you before you crossed the threshold into everything God has been preparing. But you're still here. You're still standing. You're still believing. And that means you passed. If one of these shadows tried to break you recently, if you recognize the fingerprints of this warfare in your own life, type, "I saw the shadow" in the comments right now. Because what I'm about to tell you next will explain exactly why these shadows attacked and what you're about to step into that terrified them so much. Listen to me, chosen one. While you've been sitting in that chair wondering if your best years are behind you, something extraordinary has been happening in the realm you cannot see with your natural eyes. Every single moment you thought you were losing, you were actually winning. Every time you kept your mouth shut when you had every right to scream, you were wielding a weapon hell itself couldn't defend against. Your silence wasn't weakness, beloved. Your silence was strategic warfare. Think about this. When did the enemy attack you the hardest? When you were loud? When you were fighting back with your own strength? No. He attacked you most viciously when you started learning the power of holy restraint. When you stopped defending yourself and started trusting God to fight for you. That terrified him. You know what breaks my heart? For 70, 80, maybe 90 years, you've been apologizing for not being louder, for not fighting harder, for not forcing doors open. You've called yourself weak when heaven has been calling you wise. You've called yourself passive when God has been calling you positioned. Here's what really happened while you were sitting in silence. You became the sword in the stone. Remember that ancient legend? Every warrior in the kingdom tried to pull that sword free with brute force. Muscle, sweat, desperation. But the sword wouldn't budge. It wasn't waiting for the strongest. It was waiting for the chosen one. And when Arthur, the one nobody expected, simply touched it with the hand of destiny, it slid out like butter. That's you, dear one. While everyone around you was forcing, straining, manipulating their way through life, you sat still. And in that stillness, heaven was preparing to place in your hand a weapon no one else could carry. Your restraint wasn't surrender. It was the proving ground of your authority. But let me take you deeper. Let me show you the biblical pattern that's been playing out in your life without you even knowing it. Look at Joseph, betrayed by his own brothers at 17, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison, forgotten for years. Everything about his story screamed failure. But Genesis 41-14 says something that should make your spirit leap. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. One day he's rotting in a cell. The next day he's running an empire. The reversal happened in a single moment, not gradually, not slowly. In one sovereign move of God, everything inverted. Look at Moses, 80 years old, tending sheep in the wilderness. Probably thought his life was over. Probably believed he'd missed his chance to matter. But Exodus 3:2 tells us, "And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush." 80 years of waiting. Then one burning bush. One conversation with the Almighty. And suddenly the man the world forgot became the deliverer of nations. Look at Anna, 84 years old, widowed, spent her entire life in the temple praying while everyone else went home to their families. People probably thought she was just a sweet old lady who had nothing better to do. But Luke 2:38 reveals the truth. And she, coming in that instant, gave thanks likewise unto the Lord, and spake of him to all them that looked for redemption in Jerusalem. She didn't just see the Messiah, she became the first evangelist to proclaim him. At 84, do you see the pattern? Do you understand what God is showing you? The reversal always comes after the refining. The promotion always follows the proving. The sword always appears after the stone. Your whole life, you've been trained by Hollywood endings and microwave miracles to believe that victory should come fast. But God operates on a different timeline. He's not interested in quick wins that crumble under pressure. He's building something in you that will stand for generations. Right now, at this very second, there's an eagle circling above a storm cloud. Every other bird fled when they saw the darkness coming. But not the eagle. The eagle doesn't fear the storm. It uses it. It spreads its wings and lets the very wind that scares others lift it above the chaos. While everyone else is panicking below, the eagle is soaring in sunlight. That's what's happening to you today. The storm you've been sitting in, the isolation, the silence, the feeling that life has passed you by, it wasn't sent to destroy you. It was sent to elevate you. And right now, heaven is saying, spread your wings. The reversal is here. Every person who ignored you is about to see what God was building in secret. Every door that closed is about to reveal why it had to stay shut. Every tear you cried in the dark is about to water a harvest that will feed your entire bloodline. The tables are turning. The script is flipping. Your whole story is inverting in a single moment. And heaven just declared over your life, it is time. Say it out loud right now. Don't whisper it. Declare it. The reversal is mine. But here's what you need to understand about what happens next. Let me tell you about a door that most people will never see in their entire lives. It doesn't exist in wood or steel. You can't touch it with your hands. But chosen one, it's more real than the chair you're sitting in right now. And this morning, this very Monday morning, you walked straight through it without even knowing. Listen to me carefully. There are spiritual thresholds that only appear at certain moments in time. Gates that swing open not on human schedules, but on heaven's calendar. And the most sacred of these gates, the one that separates the tested from the broken, the refined from the defeated, only becomes visible to those who have survived what should have destroyed them. You've been wondering why you're still here, haven't you? Why you outlived your spouse. Why you survived that surgery when the doctors shook their heads. Why you woke up this morning when 3 of your childhood friends are already in the ground. You thought it was random. You thought maybe God just forgot to take you home. But what if I told you that every extra year, every additional breath, every morning you opened your eyes when you wanted to stay asleep forever? What if all of that was God keeping you alive just long enough to reach this Monday? The Bible speaks of a narrow gate in Matthew 7:14. Small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. But here's what most preachers won't tell you, that gate doesn't just appear once. It appears at different seasons of your life. And there's a gate that only opens for those who've walked 70, 80, 90 years on this broken earth. A gate that younger people can't even perceive because they haven't paid the price of admission. You paid in tears they'll never cry. You paid in losses they can't comprehend. You paid in lonely nights, in funerals attended, in dreams buried, in children who forgot you, in a body that betrayed you, in a world that wrote you off as irrelevant. But every single payment was a key being forged for this Monday morning. Think about Moses. Do you remember when he stood before that burning bush? He was 80 years old. 80. He'd spent 40 years thinking he was somebody in Pharaoh's palace, then 40 years thinking he was nobody in the desert. But it wasn't until he reached 80, until his body was weak, his confidence was shattered, his dreams were dust, that God said, Now you can see what I've been preparing." The bush had been burning his whole life, beloved. But Moses couldn't see it until he'd been refined by enough fire himself. You've been walking past burning bushes for decades, and you thought they were just ordinary days, ordinary Mondays, ordinary mornings alone in your house. But today, this Monday, your eyes were finally opened to see what's been there all along. This is the gate that unlocks when you stop asking God, "Why me?" and start declaring, "Use me." This is the threshold that appears when you've buried enough people to understand that time is a gift, not a guarantee. This is the door that swings open when you've been forgotten by enough humans to finally hear heaven calling your name. The enemy tried to convince you that being home alone today meant you were abandoned. But you weren't abandoned. You were appointed. God cleared your calendar, silenced your phone, and positioned you in solitude, because what He's about to reveal requires your complete attention. In Genesis 28, Jacob had a dream of a ladder reaching to heaven. But notice where he was when he saw it alone, sleeping on a stone for a pillow, running from everything he knew. And when he woke up, he said in verse 16, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." That's you this morning. God has been in your loneliness. He's been in your silence. He's been in every Monday you thought was meaningless. And today, your spiritual eyes are finally opening to see what's been true all along. You weren't late to your destiny. You were right on divine timing. This gate unlocked a calling that was sealed until this exact moment. A purpose that required every year of your life to prepare for. An assignment that only someone with your scars, your wisdom, your tested faith could possibly carry. The world sees your wrinkles and calls it decay. Heaven sees those same lines and calls them a map of miracles. You didn't just survive 70 years, 80 years, 90 years. You graduated through levels of spiritual warfare that would have destroyed lesser souls. And now, the gate stands open. The door you couldn't see yesterday is visible today. The path that was hidden is now illuminated. But here's what you need to understand. This gate won't stay open forever. If you feel this threshold beneath your feet right now, if you sense that something eternal just shifted in your ordinary Monday morning, type in the comments, "I stepped through," because what's waiting on the other side will explain everything you've been through and reveal everything you're about to become. You know what nobody tells you about getting old in America? It's not the arthritis that breaks you. It's not the medication bottles lined up on your kitchen counter like soldiers. It's waking up on a Monday morning in a house that used to burst with noise and laughter, and now the loudest sound is your own breathing. Let me speak directly into your situation right now, chosen one. Your husband died 3 years ago, and his chair still sits in the corner because you can't bear to move it. Your daughter lives in California with grandchildren you only see on FaceTime. Your son calls once a month if you're lucky, and even then he's distracted, half listening while you try to tell him about your doctor's appointment. The church you served faithfully for 40 years, they stopped asking you to volunteer. You've become invisible, a ghost in your own life. You shuffle to the mailbox and back, and some days that's the only time you leave the house. The TV talks at you, but nobody talks with you. And late at night, when the darkness presses in and the silence screams louder than any noise ever could, you've whispered a question that terrifies you. God, did you forget I'm still here? But what if I told you something that's going to demolish every lie the enemy has planted in your loneliness? What if every single moment of isolation you've endured wasn't abandonment at all? Your isolation wasn't punishment. It was consecration. Listen to me carefully. When God is preparing to do something unprecedented in someone's life, He doesn't do it in the marketplace. He doesn't do it in the crowd. He does it in the wilderness. He does it in the silence. He does it in the place where there's nothing left but you and Him. Think about Moses. 40 years in the wilderness, tending sheep before God met him at the burning bush. 40 years of feeling forgotten, wasted, irrelevant. But Exodus 3:1 says, He led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. The back of the desert, the loneliest place on earth. That's where God showed up. Think about Elijah. 1 Kings 19 tells us he ran into the wilderness, sat under a tree, and prayed to die. "I've had enough, Lord," he cried. "Take my life." He was alone, defeated, convinced his ministry was over. But God didn't rebuke him for his honesty. God fed him, strengthened him, and then gave him a new assignment that would shake nations. Think about Jesus himself. Mark 1:35 says, "Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. The Son of God needed solitude. He craved it. He pursued it. Because some things can only be downloaded in the silence. So why does it hurt so much? Why does your loneliness feel like death instead of destiny? Because the enemy has been running the cruelest con game on God's seniors. He's convinced you that being alone means you're unloved, that silence means you're forgotten, that isolation means you're finished. But God has been doing the exact opposite. He cleared the room. He removed the distractions. He pulled back every person, every obligation, every noise that would interfere with what he's about to do in you and through you. You think your children stopped calling because they don't care. What if God muted their voices so you could finally hear his? You think you lost your spouse so you'd be lonely. What if God needed you undivided so he could rewire your entire spiritual operating system? Your loneliness became holy ground. That empty chair across from you at the kitchen table, that's not a reminder of loss. That's an invitation. God is saying, sit with me, talk with me, let me fill the space that humans can't fill anymore. That silence that haunts you, that's not emptiness. That's the sound of heaven holding its breath, waiting for you to recognize the sacred moment you're living in. Psalm 68:6 declares, God sets the lonely in families. But sometimes he has to set you apart first. Sometimes he has to isolate you so he can elevate you. Sometimes your greatest promotion requires your deepest solitude. Right now, if you're feeling this truth penetrate the loneliness you've carried like a stone in your chest, write these 6 words in the comments. I wasn't alone after all. Because, beloved, you weren't. Every Monday morning you thought was meaningless, God was there. Every silent meal, he was sitting across from you. Every tear that fell in the dark, he collected every single one. But here's what's about to shock you. The reason God kept you alone for so long is because what he's about to release through you is so powerful, so anointed, so world-changing, that if anyone else had been in the room, they would have diluted it, distorted it, or stolen it before you could carry it to full term. Which brings us to the question you need answered right now. What exactly were you being prepared for in all that silence? Beloved chosen one, as we reach the end of this sacred hour together, I need you to hold on to 3 eternal truths that will anchor your soul in the days ahead. First, your loneliness was never abandonment, it was divine appointment. Every Monday morning you spent alone, every silent meal, every moment you thought God had forgotten you, he was actually preparing you for your greatest assignment. The isolation wasn't punishment, it was consecration. Second, you passed the final test. Not because you were perfect, but because you remained faithful when everything screamed at you to give up. You stayed standing when others would have fallen. You kept believing when doubt would have been easier. Heaven has been watching, and your promotion is already signed. Third, your story isn't over, it's just beginning to make sense. The scars you carry, the tears you've shed, the years you thought were wasted. God is about to transform every ounce of your pain into purpose, so powerful it will echo through generations. But I need you to understand something deeper than knowledge, something that settles in your bones. You are not walking this path alone. The God who numbered every hair on your head is still working in your life right now, orchestrating details you can't see, opening doors you haven't found yet, preparing blessings that will leave you breathless. And beyond that, you have a community right here. Look at these comments, thousands of hearts beating with the same recognition you felt today. We see you, we understand you, we will pray with you. So let me ask you this. Now that you know your loneliness was actually preparation, what will you do with the authority God has been building in secret? Before you close this video, share your testimony in the comments below. Tell us what God spoke to your heart today. Ask for prayer, we'll surround you with intercession. And please, share this message with someone who's sitting alone right now, wondering if God still sees them. Remind them they're not forgotten, they're being prepared. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. This isn't just content, this is a movement of awakened saints who refuse to believe the lie that their best days are behind them. Now, let me pray over you with the authority of someone who has walked with God through fire. Heavenly Father, I place my hand on the shoulder of every precious soul who stayed with us through this entire message. Lord, you see them sitting there, perhaps with tears streaming down their weathered faces, perhaps with hope flickering in their hearts for the first time in years. Touch them right now. Let them feel your presence like a warm blanket wrapped around their loneliness. God, breathe life into their weary bones. Restore what the years of isolation tried to steal. Open doors no man can shut. Bring divine connections into their lives. Let their children call. Let their grandchildren visit. But more than that, let them know, truly know, that even if every human forgets them, you never will. Give them strength for tomorrow, wisdom for their decisions, and peace that surpasses understanding. Let them sleep tonight without fear, wake tomorrow without dread, and walk forward with confidence that their greatest chapter is still unwritten. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen. You are loved, you are chosen, you are never, ever alone.